Before we adopt any agenda or anything, just want to make a couple of generic comments and a few shout outs. I think to the group in general, great job. We're hanging in there, great attendance. We're conducting ourselves in the appropriate way. Proud of each and every one of you and how we are working well together and working through these. I think the word tedious comes to mind, but we're getting there. And thanks for the great attitude. And we start another meeting. You'll hear me do that. That's allergy season, so I apologize in advance. As Bob and I were just chatting a moment ago, Harry Basehart is going to do some research for us, and he said, well, it might take till June or July. And Bob reminded him, well, we're not going anywhere. We're going to be here for a while. So thank you for everyone. Speaking of thank yous, John Rankin is he's alternate number 1. He's been here, I think, every meeting. John, we just wanted to recognize you. Thank you very much for your stalwart attendance and concern about what we're trying to do here. And as we'll find out in a minute, this is likely to be our last meeting here might be our last meeting here. I just wanted to publicly thank Tony Broadbent, who's working the audio board. Tony he's a master craftsman at what he does. He did it for a long time at Salisbury University. He's doing it here at the Civic Center. Tony and the Civic Center have been extraordinary, not just for us, but of course for all the things that they're doing. So Tony, we just wanted to thank you for making the mics work, make this meeting work so smoothly, and it's greatly appreciated. And we also want to do a shout out and a thank you to PAC 14, who has also been dutifully here every meeting. And we thank you for all the hard work you've done to make these meetings available to the public. So thank you all very much. With those comments, also, we do not need to wear masks tonight. Since we last met, as we know, we've taken a bit of a positive turn as a country and as a society. We stay at it. And so the mask mandates have been lifted for meetings like this. With that, we'll now officially get this meeting started. I will ask for a motion to approve the agenda that is before you tonight.
So moved.
Thank you, Tony. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Who's that? Michelle, thank you. Excuse me again. Any comments on the agenda? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor of tonight's agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you. Next up is the discussion of the new meeting site. Been speaking with Laura Hurley. And Laura, again, thank you for all the work that you are doing on our behalf. We can now move the meetings into the council chambers on the 3rd floor of the government office building. I think most of us have been there before. If you picture that room, well, Laura, excuse me, maybe you might tell us how you would configure and how you think that room might look and work to accommodate the group.
Okay, so it's in a U shape. The council table is in a U shape. During the pandemic, we added 2 tables at the end, and we would still do that so we could fit all 15 members around the council table. The problem is we only have 14 microphones, so we would have to have 2 people share the microphone.
We will work the buddy system on the microphone on those meetings for at least 2 people. I think Phil and Doug are a nice couple to put together sharing a microphone. They've got good familiarity. They're good people. They've just been voluntold they're sharing a microphone.
Damn, Bill.
So, anything else, Laura?
I was just going to say we can meet at 5 o'clock, which is one of the nice benefits of going to the council chambers. We can start meeting at 5 on the 1st and 3rd Thursday of each month.
That's wonderful. So if the group's okay with that, we'll start with that at our first meeting in June. And thank you, Laura, for making that happen. PAC 14, as we all know, is already set up in that chamber. So they'll already just hit the buttons there, and we'll take it from there. So thank you. So and for the public, we'll also, of course, get that out and let them know, but we're letting them know now, and we will also attempt to have our county council members make that public during their council meetings upcoming. Next on the agenda is a discussion on what I'm calling the scorecard, and Laura sent that out via email, and it's simply a recap of what we've done. You know, as I've said before, we meet in here, we go pretty hard at it for a couple of hours, and then, you know, we get to it when the next week occurs, and I think this scorecard will not only be helpful for us, it will be helpful for the public as we proceed. And then toward the end of our work together, we will then have the scorecard, and as we have said repeatedly, we will review our work. We will review the positions, the recommendations that we've made, and at that time, not only us, but members of the public can kind of look, and we'll just kind of go back, and I anticipate having a few meetings toward the end of our time together where we'll kind of just go back and look at that scorecard. Dallas, welcome, thank you. But I would just ask the committee to just keep an eye on that scorecard. Laura will keep updating it, and it's just real handy as we continue to move forward. Any thoughts on the scorecard, the way that it was put together? Again, Laura just summarized the votes we've taken and the measures that we've taken, and it's just kind of a handy reference. Any thoughts on how we might improve it? Does it work for the group? Did it seem like it was a useful tool? Okay, Laura, thank you for that. We really appreciate it. Next on the agenda is approval of the minutes from May the 6th. That was our last meeting, so I'll look for a motion. Phil, thank you. Is there a second? Sharon, thank you very much. Any discussion or changes or alterations to those minutes? Hearing none, we'll call for a vote on the minutes from May the 6th. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, those minutes are approved. Thank you so much. Where we left off last time was we were in section 402. Before we go there, Paul Wilbur was kind enough, you may all recall the big discussions we were having on section 315, and it had to do with the appointments process. And one of the challenges that we had was brought to our attention that we were attempting to address had to do with some hires that were made where the person who was recommended by the county executive, that person took his or her position before the approval of and by the county council. And so after a long conversation, you may recall that I taped what we were attempting to do. I think Catherine and Bob and Dallas, we kind of merged those three ideas. And Paul Wilbur, in his brilliance, took what took us 20 minutes, and he summarized it in one paragraph. So, Paul, I thought maybe you might read what you've proposed. We don't have to take action on this tonight, but I wanted us to at least put it back on the floor and just kind of hear how Paul has prepared it and kind of see where the group, where the committee is, and we'll go from there. So, Paul, if you wouldn't mind.
If I can interrupt.
Yes, yes, Michelle.
Is it possible for the members to get a copy of that?
Yes, it is. Probably not tonight, but yes, it is. Absolutely. I'll ask everybody to turn to section 315 in their in the charter, and his amended and new edition is only about 4 lines worth. So, Paul, if you want to read the entirety or just the new part, whichever works.
I think everybody can see section 315, paragraph A in their charter, which was the discussion point. So here would be the additional language, which I tried to synthesize what everybody discussed last meeting. Unless appointed under section 414, that's the acting appointment, The initial appointment of the Director of Administration, Assistant Director of Administration, Department Heads, and Deputy Directors shall only be effective after the County Council confirms or approves the appointment. The appointment shall receive no compensation or benefits until the County Council confirms or approves the appointment.
Would you do us all a favor? Would you read that one more time, please? Thank you.
Sure. Unless appointed under Section 414, the initial appointment of the Director of Administration, Assistant Director of Administration, Department Heads, and Deputy Directors shall only be effective after the County Council confirms or approves the appointment. The appointee shall receive no compensation or benefits until the County Council confirms or approves the appointment.
Thank you, Paul. Michelle, yes, we will get copies of this. If anybody has any initial reactions, again, we're just here having a discussion. Thoughts?
There's no length of time noted in here at all for this to occur in your sentencing that you put in? I note here it says 45 days. Do we have a time limitation in there still?
I think that is the time limitation, 45 days, right there. No action, then it's considered approved, the appointment.
Paul, so basically this paragraph is going to get inserted at the end of 315A.
Beginning.
Right.
Okay, so then the language that's in 315A, at this point, we have not altered.
Correct.
Okay.
And Bob, I believe you had mentioned that if we went down this road, I think it's section 414 that would also have to be altered, if I'm recalling from the last meeting, or some section in 400 might then have to also be adjusted. For the purposes of letting people have an opportunity to read it, and I know Paul's read it, I'm prepared to just sort of hold off on this. Paul can get this sent out to the committee so that we can look. Paul, I want to thank you for, again, everybody, I literally recorded it, played it for Paul, and then he kind of just went down this road. It's succinct. I think it comes pretty close to where we were trying to triangulate those thoughts from a few weeks ago. So Michelle will do that. We'll have Paul send it out.
I'll send it to everybody.
And everybody, and then we'll bring it back up. Is that okay with?
Thank you.
Thank you. Is that okay with everyone?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Paul. Okay, so according to my line in the sand, we had just walked our way through we were beginning section 402. And we had some conversation about full-time and what that meant. And then we were going to head down A, B, C, D, and E, and F. And Tony, I see you're, Michelle first, please, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I'm gonna go back and say that I really seriously think we have to revisit, especially after reading what came through the portal on the other employment for the county executive. I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna end up limiting ourselves by saying whoever's in this position cannot have any other type of employment. You know, some people may have rental properties, some people may own a hardware store that's actively run by other employees, and you're suddenly limiting yourself to possibly losing some very good people who might come forward and want to do this position and do an excellent job, that are business people, because you're saying they can't have any other type of employment. I just think it's something that this council really, or this group has to really sit and think about.
Thank you, Michelle. Tony?
Well, if you look at what Mr. Taylor sent us, the bottom of page 2, it's sort of interesting, because he says, the county executive shall devote such time as may be required to perform the duties and responsibilities of the office. So, that might circumvent that problem. You could have somebody that gets elected who comes from a family with property someplace, and, you're penalizing him. But Bob sent this out to us, and when I read that, I thought, well, would that take care of it? At least it might be a talking point which says shall devote such time as may be required to perform the duties and responsibilities of the office. We could talk about that and say, nope, well, we could say that sounds okay. Just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you, Tony. Catherine, I think I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I looked even further into this to see that other county charters, and it is legal. You can have the piece that they can only have the one full-time position, which blew my mind, because in today's world, especially with all the technology and you being able to be connected 24 hours a day, I was surprised legally you can still do that, and that was surprising. But I do agree to possibly revisit this. And I understand there was a recommendation for a pay increase for the county executive, but it was really discouraging today to see what county or department heads were making and deputy directors were making, and then see what the county executive was making. And so if we can't make a difference increasing the salary of the county executive, then we should not make it even more difficult and say that they can't have another position as long as they fulfill the duties as required.
Thank you, Catherine. Other thoughts? So where are, Matt? Yes, sir.
I would agree with that, because I think it is feasible for business people, depending on where they are in their business and in their career, it is very feasible for them to take on a position like this, and either through good employees or other family members or whatever, or frankly, you could hire a management company. I mean, I own some commercial properties. I manage them myself as a landlord. But, you know, if I had this job and it were to interfere, then I could easily go to SVN Miller and say, hey, I need you guys to manage this for me.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Thank you, Matt. Sonia?
I don't disagree with what anybody is saying. I just, that the statement was just kind of a lot for interpretation. And I don't know how to define it better. Yeah, I don't know how to define it better. It's just very, very open, it seems like to me.
Thanks, Sonia. Tony?
You know, a concern would be if the person abused it. You know, they say, I have properties and but I'm the county exec, does this job, his or her, you know, whatever. And then all of a sudden at 2 o'clock, they get a call that, you know what, you got a flood in your apartment building, and you know, they spend the next day taking care of that. I mean, so, but I would hate to see a good person not be able to run because he owns a business or a family-operated business of which he is part of. I think that we'd be shooting ourselves in the foot.
Sharon, I saw your hand.
Yeah, in section 609, full-time required, all officers and employees in the executive or legislative branches other than the county executive, members of the county council, attorney, assistant attorney, if any, who receive a salary or compensation paid in whole or part from county funds, shall devote their entire time during the official working hours to the performance of their official duties. So I think during the normal work time is the interpretation that I have during the normal work time.
Right.
That the county executive, so if we change that, we need to come back and change that.
And
so.
I guess for the purposes of this discussion, normal work time is whatever, 8 to 5, 9 to 5, something like that.
8 to 5.
8 to 5. Thank you, Wade.
Yeah.
Blair, I saw your hand a moment
I was just
ago.
going to say one thing to add to this that I got thinking about earlier was that if somebody's in, say, the National Guard, you know, they're certainly compensated for that. They are expected to spend some time there and whatnot, but I know there's, you know, probably everybody that's at the National Guard now, unless they're full-time National Guard, has a full-time job.
The City of Salisbury mayor just spent a year
Exactly.
serving his country as a member of the National Guard, to your point. I will also add that Governor Hogan has a pretty substantial real estate family business, and there, you know, there's still income that he is earning as a result of that. But clearly Governor Hogan is also the full-time governor of the state of Maryland. So I guess what I might ask the committee, you know, is the language You know, again, if you just look at the language in that first paragraph, and to Sharon's point also on section 600 something. So the county executive shall devote his or her full time to the duties of the office. You know, does that in and of itself define well enough for anyone who may decide to run for the office that this is a full-time job? It does not, you know, add language that says there's no other duties that you can do if you have another business or anything like that. So I guess if we left it as is that sufficient? Are we going down a rabbit hole of definition and defining that perhaps we don't need to if that language exists, Sharon, where, you know, full-time duties, et cetera? Sonia?
I was gonna say, yes, it does. Can we reference that section? Because that's the clarity that, for example, for me, that I was just thinking about. I don't want to overcomplicate anything, but if it's
Right.
already there, just reference it, so.
You mean so add as referenced in section 609B?
I'm also not the wordsmith person, but that's what I'm looking
Yeah,
to,
and,
yes.
and again, I'm not sure
I don't know.
we need to do that
Okay.
either, Sonia, because I think that would happen in a whole bunch of other, if we did that and said, please see section, you know, the charter exists as a whole, and as long as we've got enough people, citizens, lawyers, working to look at the charter and reference it. So, you know, again, just asking the committee to look at, Bob, you have a comment? Yes, sir.
Well, I thought that when the process of appointing a replacement county executive was occurring, that there was an issue that came up about whether it was a full-time position. And I certainly was not involved in it. It was my impression that under the current charter, the position was that it's a full-time position, and if you weren't full-time. So if you leave the language the way it is, that doesn't solve that problem if you interpret it the way they did a year ago.
You know, that's a great point, because, again, just using the example, the person who was chosen to, by the council, by a majority of the council, to replace the county executive who had passed away is a full-time working cardiologist. And so instantly there was I think a lot of the community was scratching its head trying to determine, well, how in the world could a full-time in this case it was a full-time practicing cardiologist, also be the full-time county executive? And to Bob's point, that person withdrew his name from consideration when I think the community started to react. So I think where Bob is saying is that either the county council looked at this and determined that you could be a full-time cardiologist and the full-time county executive, and we will make a job offer to that person, and ignored the language in this paragraph, or they interpreted it in a way that worked for what a majority of the council wanted to do. So that's an interesting point. So
The section 609B, it clearly says the county executive is exempt. And that seems to me to be somewhat inconsistent with the full-time language. I don't think the two are consistent, and I think one or the other ought to be changed. And I don't want to make it overly complicated, but I just think that it's open for, we may interpret it one way, but somebody else 5 years from now may interpret it a different way. And I just think it would be better, if that's a concern, that we try to clean the language up so that it's clear what it means, whichever way we go.
I got Sonia, and then I've got Blair. Sonia?
I just wanted to clarify, what was the section that you said in the 600s? Because does that help clarify it? Does, I mean,
I don't think it does. That's what.
that's what you're saying, it says exempt, so it doesn't
They're
clarify
they're
it.
contradictory. Bob, they're
Section
contradictory.
609B
609B, which is on,
says
yeah.
that the county executive is exempt from full-time employment, shall devote their entire time during the official working hours was the language that Sharon was referencing. So, I mean, the problem is.
Well, clearly, if the guy is a cardiologist, he really couldn't be a cardiologist and devote his full time
Correct.
for
Correct.
609. But this is not something that was asked for in section 402 from the council anyway. I don't see anything there where it says they want to know about him being full-time or part-time.
What,
Question 11.
I might suggest that's because they thought it was okay, the decision that they made, if you will, right? They were okay with it. Blair?
Just a question.
Yes, sir.
Our current county executive, is he also the current county administrator?
That's another whole, yeah, the current full-time county administrator is also the acting county executive.
Okay.
That's a rabbit hole of a whole nother, yes.
And we're discussing this issue about that and full-time versus what is full-time versus not, et cetera.
Our,
And this person is going to be for basically half a term or more, correct?
yeah, and to that point, Wayne, correct me if I'm wrong, our current county administrator, we do not have a deputy county administrator, which we have, certainly there's budgetary money for that. And so we have one person right now serving in 3 jobs, in effect. Acting county executive, county administrator, and deputy county administrator. Is that accurate?
Way to load on me.
What you really have is an acting county executive, and the other 2 positions are vacant.
Correct.
That's the reality of it.
And that's no way to operate a business. So back to one of the points that we've been talking about consistently, this seems to me to be one of those areas that is screaming out for attention and screaming out for us to figure out a better way forward within the language of the charter. So I'm prepared tonight to sit here and spend as much time as possible to get this right. Michelle?
One question, why haven't we hired a deputy?
Nobody will take the job.
So, you know, and yeah, we're in a, because the county council attempted to hire a full-time cardiologist and then did not go down the road of, we'll get into that later, fulfilling their charter requirement to hire a county executive. Within 45 days, we now have an acting county executive, which he's a wonderful person and he's doing a good job, and it's not a reflection on him personally, but it's a position that it's really not, it's untenable. So, Bob, you've got a big brain. What's your thought on where we
Well, that's
go?
not correct. I thought I heard Sharon say something, and maybe I misinterpreted it, but I thought maybe she was suggesting that the word "shall devote their entire time during the official working hours" could be used in section 402 instead of having full-time, put those extra words in there.
That's what I heard as well, Bob.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what I thought Sharon was suggesting, and it made sense to me when she said it. So.
yeah. Would somebody like to, let's try that. Sharon?
Mike?
Yeah, Matt.
Okay, one fallacy on that, okay?
Yeah.
And I mean, in the event of a crisis, it worries me to start saying, oh, well, during normal working hours. Well, if we have, you know, a catastrophic fire somewhere in this community that, you know, property damage and loss of life and all that, you know, the county executive is probably going to need to be on the spot, and he's not going to be able to click out at 5 o'clock.
Well, that's understood.
I mean, yeah.
Well, as Wayne said at the last meeting, and I think you know this, Matt, given your familiar history.
Yes.
Being a mayor or a county executive, you know, it's a 24/7 job because of the very thing that you're talking about. So I think Sharon is just attempting to put the language in there that suggests that, and Sharon, if you want to take an attempt at, and Bob, you just said it again, but if one of you will lay that on the table again, on how you said it.
Okay, let me back and do it again. What I was trying to say, well, actually what I was doing was reading it and suggesting that putting the language in that would, instead of the word, Bob, I think you said it for me,
You
but
just
say
did,
it
yeah.
again.
Well,
Yep.
what I
During the-
thought I heard Sharon saying was that in section 402, we would in essence delete the words devote his full time
There you go.
and insert the words devote their entire time during their official working hours to the
Yes.
performance of their official duties. So we're making it longer, but it's, as I would interpret it in reference to Mr. Tillman, Matt Tillman, this is like a minimum requirement. It's not a maximum requirement. I would assume anybody who runs for county executive understands that it's a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week job. But this is a minimum requirement. They're expected to be there full-time, 8 to 5 every day. But, you know, they've got a lot more duties than that. I mean, anybody who has their own business understands that. You show up and you do what you have to do to get things done. And for all intents and purposes, the county executive, he or she is in that category. I think they have to put in however many hours is necessary to get the work done.
So, do we also want to address 609B that exempts the county executive? We want to get to that when we...
Well, I think you can put that language in there. It's the same, it kind of takes care of it. They're consistent at that point.
I'll entertain a motion.
I would move, and I'm jumping ahead, I'd move that in 609B that we strike other than the county executive.
I agree.
Consistent, it has an exception.
And then read that, Matt.
Okay, then it would read, full-time required, all officers and employees in the executive or legislative branches.
How about if we put including the county executive instead of other than the
Okay.
county executive?
Okay, including the county executive, members of the county council, et cetera, shall devote their entire time during official working hours in the performance of their official duties.
So that...
Is your
Go ahead.
intent to make it a full-time position, period? Because that's what I think you're doing, which is, I'm not objecting to it, I'm just asking a question, clarification.
Maybe incorrectly, I assumed that that it was a full-time position.
Right.
Well, I think they're trying to suggest that you could hold a position, you could have not a second job, but, somebody raised the issue, if somebody has a family business and they have other people running it,
Right.
they would still be able to participate in that family business.
And I would agree with that. But I think and I'm not quite sure how we word it so that somebody doesn't try to slide through, but it is feasible to be done, but the person who takes this job needs to understand that this is going to be their primary job. It doesn't mean that they, can't talk to their adult son about what's going on in the business over the dinner table or on the weekend. But I think it needs to be a full-time job, and we can't have it, the person should not have a lot of other distractions.
I apologize. I would, if you took out the words county executive out of that sentence, and I'll defer to Paul on this, but to me, if you take that out, you're making him in essence a completely full-time position. He can't hold any other positions.
Yep.
And there are only 4 positions in the county essentially that doesn't apply to: the county executive, county council, county attorneys.
Right.
And if you take him out, then you're basically saying he is an absolute full-time attorney, full-time employee, and can't have any other employment whatsoever.
Yep. Well, I'm gonna, Tony?
Well, where again, it says the official working hours to the performance of their official duties. I'm back in 609. Well, wouldn't it be something if somebody says, well, if you look on the door, it says the hours here are 9 to 5. I mean, you could have somebody, I hope not, be that arrogant and say, 5 o'clock, I'm out of here. And, oh, there's a fire, I'm not going to.
Well, what I think,
So I'm back to what I said earlier, where if we said, be required to perform the duties and responsibilities of the office.
As
To
needed.
me, if he or she walks out of it at 5:30 and there's a catastrophe at 7:30, I would expect them to be there.
well, of course, I don't think we need to put that in the charter. The governor, the president, the mayor, the county executive, they show up when emergencies happen. I don't think that has to be in the charter. Dallas?
Would it help to say, revise the language so that it limits when the secondary employment can take place? So instead of saying, well, he can't have or they can't have a secondary job, they can't work for their secondary job between normal business hours. That way, they can still do what they got to do, because I mean, there's a lot of people that have part-time jobs and other stuff like we've talked about. So it's just saying, look, between whatever, 8 to 5, 9 to 5, you know, you're working here. That doesn't say that your work won't have to extend past 5, and it just means, you know, after 5 o'clock is when you would do whatever other your business with. You know, that's just my suggestion. I don't know if that helps.
I really think if you want to have it this way, then what you need to do is you need to hire an county executive. Don't have one that's elected. And then you can make any requirements and demands you want to make of them. Make it a hired position, not an elected position. It can be a hired position.
It's not what the people
No,
voted for.
that's not. A
I'm
hired
just saying that-
position is called a county administrator.
That's what we used to.
We have a county executive, which is an elected position.
And that's always elected.
Always elected position, correct. And remember, there's a
It
county
worked real well.
executive, and there's also a county administrator. So,
I mean, you know, this county apparently ran by a history that's been given to me many years without an executive.
except until the voters determined that they wanted a county executive form of government.
And we still aren't giving the voters a chance to say whether or not they still want that form of government.
Because this committee voted 15 to nothing.
Yeah, oh, I know. I'm just saying, you know, I think a lot of things we're doing here
So-
in retrospect are going to come back and bite.
Well, that's not the issue at hand right
Okay.
now. The issue at hand right now is fixing the language regarding the full-time responsibilities of the full-time county executive.
I'm probably being overly simplistic here, and I apologize for that. It doesn't seem to me, what we're discussing here is not how many hours the county executive is going to work. What we're really discussing is whether the county executive can have any secondary employment or secondary income. And that's what I think is being discussed. I don't think, to be blunt about it, if the county executive today, an elected county executive decided he was going to work from 9 to 5 every day, there's nobody who can stop him from doing that. If he decides, I'm not getting out of bed at midnight to go because there's an emergency, the only people who can address that are the voters. And I don't think this is going to change that. The only real issue, I think, is whether or not this committee thinks that a person who's elected to the position of county executive, whether he or she should be able to have any other income, in essence, beyond his employment. And that to me is the issue. I don't think the changing the language is going to mean he can only work from 8 to 5 or 9 to 5, and that's his only job.
Well, I hear you on that. What we were discussing a few moments ago, however, was the circumstance of how we've ended where we end up now, which is within, there was a choice made to appoint a person who had a full-time position in another field outside of government, and that didn't turn out very well. So I look at it, Bob, that yes, I fully acknowledge we're also trying to address the secondary employment, secondary income situation. But I think we're also trying to correct and somehow make it understood that the duties of the county executive are full-time, primary, 9 to 5, full-time duties. Sonia, I see your hand up.
No, well, I mean, that was my point before, not trying to make it overly complicated, but the wording that's in 609, I keep saying that Sharon's like, it's in 609, I didn't make it up. But in 609 alludes to that. My challenge is whether it's the charter committee in 5 years, 10 years, it does capture it, it makes sense to me now, but when you read it later on, does it make it sound like it's 9 to 5? Is somebody gonna end up having the same discussion that we're having now? That's kind of just the thought behind it, but we do need to clarify it because secondary income is very, very different than having a second career.
Correct.
Yes.
So I don't know if it's as simple as saying something that you cannot have a second career. You can have a job, you can have real estate, you could even have a store that somebody else manages, but you cannot have a second career. And I don't know how you word that, but that's what I just wanted to understand and clarify.
Thank you, Sonia. I agree. We're getting there. Tony, and then
You know,
Catherine.
there's one thing that, give you an example. You could have someone in the Guard or Reserve. 12 years in, they run for executive, get elected. They're entitled to 4 weeks military leave with pay. That's a state law, 1940. Because I ran into that, being in education. And it really irritated a lot of people that I could do that. But that's the law. 4 weeks with pay. And I was getting military pay at the same time. So, something to think about.
Catherine?
I was just wondering, can we put a motion on the table, Sharon? I've got it put together. Go ahead. Just to get a feel for what everyone's thinking.
I'm going to ask the other 14 or so people, don't let me be the only stenographer. Please write down what Catherine is about to say, because that's where we got ourselves jammed up a few weeks ago. Everybody has a pen, so go ahead, Catherine. What are you attempting?
So it's really what Sharon and Bob said. If you look on, in section 402, this is where I'll begin. The county executive shall, and I'm gonna skip to section 609B, devote their entire time during the official working hours to the performance of their official duties. Period.
You want to repeat that?
The county executive shall devote their entire time during the official working hours to the performance of their official duties, and leave the rest of section 609 the same.
I'll second that.
Shall devote their entire time during the official working hours to their official duties.
To the performance of their official duties.
How does that change what's already written there?
It just makes it parallel. So it would be 402 would read the same as 609B. And I think that's where the question was, how did that happen in county council when 609B was already in our charter? And if Sharon was there to point that out at that time, then
I was at home doing it.
then I think we wouldn't have been in the same jam. All it's doing is just making both areas parallel to one another and just reinforces that full-time hours during, normal operational hours.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
Is there a second for that motion?
I think Tony seconded it.
Tony, did you second that?
No, I gotta think about it.
Well, if somebody wants, So I'm gonna attempt to read the proposed motion. We don't have a second yet. In 402, the line that begins the county executive. The county executive shall devote their entire time during the official working hours to the performance of their official duties. That's the motion. Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, there's a second for that. Now we can discuss that. Does the group think, you understand what Catherine is attempting to do is align 402 with 609? Does this, Sonia?
Just the question is, so I'm just gonna come back, does that wording, I think it kinda does, and I can't think of any other wording to clarify it, but does it preclude that you from having a second career? It's a general question, yes or no?
I would say the answer is no. I would say it doesn't preclude that.
Right.
I would say the language as proposed, it's my opinion. There's other people here, I don't think it answers that question. Sharon?
I need a question.
Okay?
Okay. I know what I started with. Okay. Do we agree that the person should or should not be full-time?
Well, you want to do a hand vote of that?
So that I can better work
I think there's two
language.
issues. Are they full-time and can they have another job? It seemed like.
No, first and foremost, she's asking if we think that the office, forget everything else, is the
Yeah.
office of county executive a full-time position? Is the question she's
Yes.
asking.
Clearly.
That's what I'm asking.
Okay.
Hands in
So
the
we're all
air.
clear that it is a
Clear.
full-time?
It is, the consensus of the committee is that is it a full-time position?
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And so can I ask another
Of
question?
course you may.
My next question is then, does the committee agree that a person holding a full-time position can hold a second position, or should we look at language that would exclude that if we're talking about his or her own business?
Well, again, I think that takes us down a whole.
Does that take us back to where we
I
were?
think it just takes us down so many
Okay.
different permutations of how we're defining what
What's
other
full-
job the person may or may not be able to have. And
I guess too,
To-
I'm looking at full-time, I mean, I don't know, having been there, how you define what full-time hours are for a person who actually is responsible to 100,000 citizens at any time.
what are the hours of the office of the county executive? Office.
8 in the morning until 5 in the evening.
Thank you. So that's when those doors are open.
Yeah.
So
So we're
that says to
aligning-
me that the county executive hours,
To be at work when the office is open.
the official duty hours are 8 to 5 when the office is open. But again, now we're getting into,
Okay.
I looked at 6 or 7 or 8 other charters, and almost every other charter makes the county executive a full-time position.
and
And if I don't know which the right answer is, but if we go the way we're going, we'll be the outlier. We won't be in the mainstream. And in Frederick County, for instance, their charter says the executive shall devote full time to the duties of the office. The executive may not participate in any private occupation for compensation. During the term of office, the executive may not hold any other office of profit. So they've gone to the exact opposite extreme. They say you can't do anything else and you can't get any compensation from anywhere else. That seems to be the other extreme. Most of the rest of them just seem to say that it's a full-time position, period. So,
well, let me ask this. We don't define it as such, do we?
I agree with that.
We say the county executive shall devote his full time, but what if we just had a sentence that said the office of county executive is considered a full-time position? The way Frederick County does, we can get rid of, we don't need to add the other side of it, but should we, I'm asking to the group, should we simply add a sentence? I realize we have a motion on the floor, by the way, and I have not forgotten that, and this is the discussion. You know, we do not say those exact words. We don't. Wayne, I think your hand is up. It appears your hand is up.
I just went to Webster's
Okay.
dictionary, and full-time is an adjective, occupying or using the whole of the usual working day or week.
Okay.
Say it again.
So,
Occupying or using the whole of the usual working day or week.
and
See, I think we're trying to wordsmith common sense.
well, I do too, but common sense got thrown out of the window when a cardiologist was hired to be the county executive.
Yeah, well.
But he didn't
okay.
serve.
And he did, well, but he was hired.
But this language was already
The
there.
assumption was he was gonna give up one.
That assumption was never, who assumed that?
Well, obviously, the people who voted for him.
I don't know if they were assuming that.
We can't be in their minds.
Understood. So what I think we're attempting to
We're
do.
already, and, excuse me.
Yeah, no,
We're already saying, in the language that's there now, the county executive shall devote his full time to the duties of the office. I don't think we need to say a lot more than that.
I
Except
agree.
clean up this 60, whatever it is.
609.
609B.
To make sure it says the same thing.
and right now it doesn't say the same
Right,
thing.
Right.
But what Catherine proposed does change it to make them both say the same thing.
Yes, it does.
So her
My-
motion's still on the floor.
What Catherine is proposing, you're saying does,
If, the way I understand it, that it makes 402 and 609 match.
It just brings more clarity that everyone's asking for to,
I
to
think,
section 402.
Bob, I think you're suggesting though, if we go down this road, we're making it less clear, potentially. We're not defining it as full-time.
I'm saying that every other county basically has a county executive that says it's a full-time position.
Right.
Now, maybe it's what full-time is in Webster's dictionary, but it says it's a full-time position. We have one of the council people had raised his hand.
I don't know what would change.
Yeah, Laura, I saw your hand up also.
I just had a quick comment. I know a lot of people that have 2 full-time jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, they can work a 3 to 11 shift, go home and sleep for 5 hours, and then do an 8 to 5 shift or something similar to that. I mean, so it's very possible to have 2 full-time jobs.
Mr. Holloway,
Your statement about.
please come to the microphone if you don't mind. Thank you. And welcome Councilman Joe Holloway. Good evening, sir.
Your statement about us electing or appointing the doctor, he did state that he was going to resign from the hospital.
Okay,
So
thank you.
that's why we assume that.
All right, thank you, thank you, thank you. So we're back to, who else has?
Is there any consideration for the fact that the executive is elected by people, not hired?
That's what I was trying to say before, Sharon, thank you.
Oh, is that what you're saying?
That's what I was trying to say.
The fact that he's elected by the people, to me, means that he gives his full time, and I think that's very clear. I think it's already very clear that if the people elected him to serve, he serves full time.
To Phil's point, that it's already
Can we
there.
ask that to be read again?
Absolutely. I will do my best to read it again. I think, Catherine, go ahead. Yes, if you, go ahead, please.
Back to me.
Yep.
Find my pages.
This is the motion that's on the table.
Okay, so let's try this again. All right, just to make things parallel. The county executive shall. And of course, I'm on the wrong one. Hold on. Sorry. Okay, the county executive shall devote their entire time during the official working hours to the performance of their official duties. And then both would be parallel.
Wayne, Sonia. Wayne,
Can we modify that to say the county's official working hours?
Absolutely.
during the county's official working hours. We'll get around to modifying
Yeah,
if
okay.
Catherine, hold on, Sonia?
So with Mr. Holloway's clarification, right, for what was stated from and assumed by the, or what was told to the council, because it did seem like a different anomaly, and the fact of what Bob has stated, that comparative charters state that include full-time. I don't have necessarily a problem with the wording, but to be different than all the other charters and the definition of full-time and everything like that, it sounds like that anomaly is something that was considered. You can only react on what was being told to you. So if they were being told that the second career was going to be, stopped and we're going to do this full-time, then it's not as much of an issue. It's just a thought. So I like keeping full-time in.
So I'm listening, and I'm going to ask the group to consider including Catherine in the motion. Going back again, stay with us here, we're at section 402. What if we said the county executive shall be a full-time position, comma, and the county executive shall devote their entire working, then we add what Catherine's motion has said. So Bob, I'm trying to find that language that would say very explicitly that the county executive is a full-time position, comma, who shall devote the rest of that motion.
So I can amend my motion.
Would you like to amend your
and see
motion?
if this goes a little bit better.
Okay.
And we need to take his out too. So the county executive shall be a full-time position, and they shall devote their entire time during the official county working hours to the performance of their official duties.
That works.
Does that cover everybody?
Can I get a second on that amended motion?
Second.
Thank you, Dallas. Is there discussion on that amended emotion? Emotion. Yes, this is quite a motion. The motion. I like it.
Discussion.
Discussion, that's where we are.
Okay.
Yep, that's where we are.
Right. This basically already states that. If you read this, it says he shall devote his full time to the duties of the office. I mean, it's...
Well, again, we're trying to correct what occurred and make this a little bit stronger.
I think we're overcorrecting, to be very honest. Someone just passed this to me. Mr. Rankin said, basically, if you look at it, federal employees are prohibited from devoting time on outside activities during normal working hours. It applies to employees at all levels in the federal government. And I don't know if that is pertinent here, but what I'm saying is, I think what we have here is strong enough. I think it covers it. And, I'm not trying to be mean, but you keep going back, well, they did this. They hired the guy, and he was going to be a full-time cardiologist, and he was going to be a full-time county executive. And you keep just going back to this one example, and Councilman Holloway just stood up here and told you, no, he was going to resign from his cardiology position. So that's just where I'm coming from.
Sharon?
Well, Bob had.
You and Bob, it's all good. I'm
Okay.
trying here.
Okay. I don't think this needs to be changed if we are trying to make him a full-time. I think it already says that, and that he's responsible to the duties. Maybe we need to consider adding something that specifically states or specifically references a second employment or that. But I think this already takes care of what we need.
Thank you,
It
Sharon.
wasn't followed, but it was already there.
Okay. Bob?
I think if we leave section 402 the way it is and take the word county executive out of section 609B, then that fixes the problem. Because
Yeah.
right now, it says the county executive is the same as the county councilman, which means he isn't a full-time job. That's the inconsistency.
Right.
I think if you remove the word county executive from 609B, you fix the problem. I don't think you need to do anything else.
I concur on that.
I would agree with that.
Okay, so the first thing we need to do, we have a motion on the table, an amended motion. We can vote on that. I'm going to ask the person who made the motion, and look, this is dizzying. Not on the parliamentary part, I got that part, but on the part of, are we now going back and saying that if we just amend 609B, that we think that takes care of the problem?
Yes.
Yes.
I think the problem is there's an inconsistency between those two sections, and the way we eliminate that inconsistency is removing the words county executive from 609B. And once you do that, you take away the inconsistency.
So let's vote down the motion.
The motion, let's take a vote on the motion on the table. But I want to ask the person who made the motion if, and you know, that person has to withdraw the motion, and I'm not here to put Catherine on the spot, but there's an alternative being proposed that a lot of the people on the committee think addresses what we're trying to do here.
I'm just trying to keep everybody happy, and
I
I'm
know.
trying to follow all
I know.
the conversations and find something
I
that
know.
sort of is parallel to one another.
Yep, I know.
But I don't even know what to say. I don't even know who wants what anymore. I'd be happy to withdraw my motion if the majority feels that if remove county executive from 609B, that we are good, and we don't have to put county working hours, the official county working hours, or should we include that, I guess is the question.
I'm going to say no, because with the definition of full-time, it's already implied.
Okay.
So let's do this, let's take a vote on the motion. Let's do that. I'm not going to ask you to withdraw the motion. We're going to take a vote on the motion that's on the floor, which is to redefine section 402 as has been presented. All those in favor of that motion, please say aye. All those opposed, please say no.
No.
Thank you for the motion. Thank you for the discussion. We're going to, I'll entertain jumping out of order and putting a motion on, no, I don't want to do that because that wasn't on the agenda. So we're going to get back to 609. I don't think anybody will forget that we're going to be making a change to 609 when we get to 609. Thank you, everybody. Again, this is tedious and it's hard, and thank you. So let's continue on with section 402. We have,
Wayne's got his hand up.
who's got a hand up? Wayne.
I do want to circle back to the discussion earlier where we separated a secondary source of income from secondary employment. And I do think that ought to be addressed in the charter. I don't see any reason why a county executive can't have a secondary source of income. And I think that clarification may be needed.
Does that mean he goes to work, he gets off at 5 o'clock and goes to his business, or does that mean he's getting revenue in from stocks and bonds?
Pension.
Has income from a family business.
Yeah, that's fine. But
I mean, I
does
wouldn't,
he
I don't see why we would disqualify a county executive from holding office who has an interest in a business.
You can't do that.
But he wouldn't go there and work.
Not during normal business hours.
Not, again, we had this discussion last week, and,
We took a vote on it, right?
yeah, I mean, I do think that that's an open question. Can there be a secondary source of income as opposed to a secondary job? Secondary employment is different than a secondary source of income.
Yeah, it is.
Right. And last time, I believe we put the county executive shall devote his or her full time to the duties of the office and not partake in secondary employment, and apparently that passed.
But we just
We just
rescinded
reopened it.
that, didn't we?
Did we do that?
We did, it did pass last time.
That's why we need a scorecard.
And we just rescinded that. So are we ready to?
We're going to take a 5-minute break. Really, we're going to take a 5-minute break.
Secondary employment, as you said, is different from a secondary source
Source of income. I've got a secondary source of income,
609A addresses that. It says
but it's passive income.
prohibition against additional compensation in 609A, and the county executive is exempted from it.
Where, which one?
Or it could be, it says member of the county council, nor the county executive. You could just strike out the county executive, and now they can get additional compensation.
When you say full-time, do we need to have that discussion anymore? But if we clarified it there.
Yeah, we did.
We do the same thing to A that we did to B.
I heard you.
I think that discussion is needed. I think. Yeah. Yeah. I think the thing.
When you say full-time, I'm gonna let it.
Yeah. But what we addressed here was, I guess, secondary employment. I mean,
I'll tell you what the councilman said, clarify something, because that was just odd. You can't have two little careers, but if they're going under the assumption, and all people say that he was going to, let go of the other position, then it follows exactly the charter, so that obviously is different. So, and I'm a person, I would process, and I can overthink the world. I can. I don't want to overthink this. If you're doing your full time and you happen to have secondary employment, but you're still doing yourself full time, look at what Mr. Rankin gave, the information they gave for federal employees. It's the same thing.
yeah.
It's the same. It's the same piece.
We all assumed the first pitch on Saturday for the
I know some government department heads have secondary income.
All right, I'll throw myself under the bus.
It's obviously unresolved.
Like Carpenter, if I was saying, 4 years.
Somebody said the other day about the Delmont's age problem.
Yeah.
Certainly a first class sentence. But somebody complained because Biden was there.
That's a county.
What I was kind of thinking about was,
Well, because he was from Delmont.
if there's an emergency that goes on, right? Like we were saying, I'm gonna walk out of my secondary job if I need to. They will know that, hey,
I don't want him to have a job.
and if he has a water broken pipe,
If I were elected county
most of us have personal days that we
I could still get compensation.
So I would think if I busted pants tomorrow and I'm the county executive, I'm gonna call in, I'm gonna tell Laura, whoever, right, that, hey, I've got to
The very last
my house is full.
Exactly.
Right?
At all.
That would be understood.
And maybe,
He's taking some ways to go work another job.
but they don't have to. He doesn't have
Should be
personal
doing
days.
Right.
He doesn't really have personal days
Yeah, okay.
because he's elected.
Okay.
So maybe you could say, well, the language I had here was the county executive shall normally devote.
How you doing, Sharon?
So normally,
I have a headache right now.
it's odd.
Or some, and as emergent, and as needed by other, county issues or something, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know, because there will be times in the middle of the night something will come up.
Yeah.
And we certainly want him there.
But I guess if we say, we keep it as this, you can't have secondary employment, period. I don't like that. No.
They bought a house. Yes. Well,
Especially now with gig workers. I can use my phone and do my secretary anytime I want.
Right.
And I can work for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And so what?
It hasn't affected the lessons. I mean, it really was. No, I'd like to go in the back.
No different than a smoke break.
It's New York.
But it's still expected. No, this is your prime
Yes.
deal.
Yes.
And anything needed of your time is expected to be there.
Right.
Right. And again, and the voters.
Exactly.
The voters, well, those things happen, it needs to be public, and the voters will remember that when election time comes around.
Exactly.
She's an assistant federal. Well, that district. I understand. Yeah, she's like really high. I mean, she's a federal. They would do a very good job. And I think that's smart. Now, wow. Anyway, but that's what they're playing. Appealing to the house it's a really nice house. I mean, art's very taken care of, and takes care of things. I was there because Casey had her husband. So I went over to the house. I was there for 4.5 hours. You stayed with the inspector the whole time? More or less, yeah. I was there for the whole inspection. You didn't go up on the roof? I did not go up on the roof. But I mean, it was extremely thorough. And then Peter had everything in the house. He cold? And then the second guy came out and did the.
Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of.
I was there for that.
Yeah.
And I spent most of my life on, I mean, when I was a little kid, most of my life on public words. So I'm not real familiar with it. I mean, when I was in just the opposite. I'm always.
Oh, then I just told you.
Whatever it is, right.
That's right.
It was very well done. Very well.
I will, yes.
Also, there for years.
Be said for public works.
Oh, tell me, Mary and I are.
Yeah.
Wow. So we've officially,
Hopefully we'll never have one. Remember when the urban services agreement expired, Paul Martin was the mayor, and I was asked the county constructors to go down and talk to Paul. Come in here, Phil, come on in here. Sit down. I ain't got permission. I'm doing good. I said, I'd like to talk about your urban services. He said, stop. It's hard to say.
Those chairs aren't very comfortable. They're better than new chairs.
No question of that.
I have this crap is all over, I really do.
okay, we are ready to begin again.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy, crazy, crazy.
Is everybody back? Yes, everybody's back. I want to thank committee member Blair Todd, and I want to apologize to the committee because we just spent the better part of 45 minutes talking about something that we'd already decided at the last meeting. At the last meeting, we addressed section 402 and we voted yes by 8-3 margin with 4 abstentions to add the county executive shall devote his or her full time to the duties of the office and not partake in secondary employment.
And
So
I
we
believe,
voted on
Mike,
that at the last meeting. So, like with all things, as I said at the top of the meeting, and I am owning and I apologize to the committee, we will be keeping score, though we didn't keep score very well tonight, and I own that. But this is why we have a scorecard. And when we get back and we circle back and look at what we're recommending, we have the opportunity to address it again if need be. Blair, thank you very much. We are getting away from that first paragraph. We're going to try to make a little bit of progress in this next hour. In front of us, one of the questions that the county council had asked us to consider is, should a provision be added to require the county executive to provide any information that is requested by an individual county council member, which is for the purpose of introducing a devaluating legislation or to engage in the review and monitoring of government programs, activities, and policy implementation. That is something that the council had asked the group committee to consider in section 402. Is there any interest? Wayne, do you have any thoughts on this as a member of that side of the government, having worked in that office for a long time?
No, I think that's a basic of good governance. And I don't see why an executive would not be forthcoming in bona fide.
In having good communication with members of the council.
Yeah,
Sure.
I think that's simply a matter of good governance.
That's a common sense, good governance that maybe doesn't need to be put in the charter. And
Well, if a council member or members feel that it needs to be further clarified, then I think it's something that the group ought to discuss. But to me, it's good governance.
I don't understand how that's, what the request is, how that's different than 402C.
providing the council with any information.
Yeah,
Right.
and I mean that as a question. I don't know what,
Understood.
I don't know what devaluating legislation means.
We have Mr. Holloway, thank you again for joining us. Please,
It's
yes, sir.
I don't know who put that question in, I didn't, but it's a good question. But the real question is what do you do about it when they won't provide that information?
Well, I think that's
So I
the
think
good
that's-
governance part, right?
So there's got to be some ramifications when, there's a rebuttal and, no answers come. So
Right.
that's maybe something you might want to address.
Thank you. That's a good, that's a good question we've seen play out in lots of different government entities over the time. Blair, yes, sir.
In looking at section 402C, because it says providing the council with any information, and our question here has, I'm sorry, if there's information requested by an individual county council member, is that the difference that we want? Would we want to add providing the council or individual council member with any information? Would that help clarify and address the concern, or is there more to it?
Having been a city councilman in a former life, and we've got a couple of council people here who served without a county executive, and we have a councilman here who's bringing up a very valid point, and I would take it by Councilman Holloway's comment that often some of those requests have not been listened to in the past, and that creates a problem. You know, Wayne, I look at you and I go back to the good governance aspect of things. And Blair, to your point, you know, having every individual council member potentially every day asking the county executive to provide information on A, B, C, or D would certainly become cumbersome and perhaps overly burdensome. Having a council work through the council president to meet regularly with the county executive to talk about the issues of the council, you know, I think opinion of one, this is kind of an example, and I completely appreciate where Mr. Holloway comes from and the frustration. I think this was likely one of those areas where there were some personality challenges as opposed to needs to fix it in the charter. And you know, good governance and good activities by county executives and county council members sometimes goes in a different direction. But it's just my thought. Does the committee, Blair, do you want to make a motion? Does the committee want to have a discussion on this? And I hear where, you know, what you're asking is a very valid question. I would be, Michelle, I think
Discussion.
you're leaning in.
I think we need a discussion on it, and what I would be looking for there, perhaps the questions could be directed through the council president, but I think what needs to happen is within a certain time frame that the answers should be received that are being requested, or the information, and if not, there should be some type of penalty for it.
Well, it's ironic you say that because we're
I
just
don't usually
having
say
a-
penalty.
Yeah,
Okay?
we're just
That's a
having.
rare word.
During the break, we're just having a conversation about, you know, the punitive side of things is where all of this begins to break down. And I don't know what the punitive side of this, if council member X asks for information on issue Y, and we put in here within 30 days, and if the county executive does not provide it within 30 days, then what? That gets us down a whole bunch of challenging areas that I'm not sure we can answer.
I think we need to answer it though, because it's what we've gone back to with how department heads are hired and not compensated if they haven't been approved by the council, or you know, it all goes back to that same issue of there has to be a way to address what happens when the council and the executive don't agree. When there's the charter says something and either side doesn't do what the charter says, what is the penalty? I mean, I get that you know, that's a big discussion for probably a meeting or two unto itself, but at some point we have to address this. We've encountered several times now where it comes down to what happens when the charter isn't followed. I'm not saying we address it right now. I'm just saying at some point we do have to talk about it though.
I'm going to ask Mr. Wilbur. He and I we've had some conversations about this, and you know, Paul, this is not black and white, if you will. This is difficult territory.
It is.
If you want to just weigh in on the macro level of the challenges you see, I know that's.
Well, if you look at the U.S. Congress, they have a censure procedure, but you know, one of the things I think is difficult is what is we'll say a minor charter violation versus a major charter violation? How do you define that? I think another puzzle is you can reprimand people, publicly say you violated the charter and, you know, vote to do that. But does that change behaviors of elected officials? Maybe, maybe not. I don't think that, you know, in this executive council form of government, we're going to be able to put a mechanism in there where you can remove a council person or an executive from office for a charter violation. I think that's a difficult one, legally difficult. Certainly, that's why we have elections. They're all elected officials. So it's a tough nut to crack, this beyond a censure motion, what to do for charter violations. And how do you determine what level of punishment, if you had some super body that could deliver punishment, is appropriate for a particular violation? It's really difficult. I don't think you're going to find in other charters too much in the way of, if you violate the charter, you're removed.
Yeah. Wayne, again, offline, you just done some homework into looking at charters and if there's any punitive actions out there, and you didn't find much. I'm not saying we're not going to try to find something, but what were you just
Yeah, I
saying?
looked at all the charters of executive form governments in the state of Maryland, and when it came to punitive actions for violations, it all pivoted on adjudication. And it occurred to me, and I was just asking Paul about it, it occurred to me whether or not that might be a function of state law, because these people are elected by the citizens. So it gets very tricky removing or sanctioning someone who's been elected by the people without a proper adjudication. And that seems consistent in all the charters that I looked at. To talk about, the most egregious, at least in my opinion, charter violation we had was when a department head was left in place when they had not been confirmed by the county council and continued to be paid. And I think that a remedy for that could be that in that case, a continuation of payment to an individual like that would amount to a misappropriation of funds. And however, that still takes you, I believe, and I'll defer to Paul and Bob, I still think that takes you to court, but I think telling an executive that if you pay this person one more time, that's misappropriation of funds and we will pursue that. I think that would give an executive pause for concern.
And we just attempted to add some teeth to that earlier tonight
Right.
by.
Yeah. The Maryland Constitution, if you commit a felony, then you are removed from office.
Right.
That's right there in the Maryland Constitution. But I think that's what Wayne was headed down that road. If you reach the point where you've committed a crime and you are convicted of a crime and that's a felony, then you lose your office.
Right. Thank you, Wayne. Thank you, Paul. Hey, let's roll down section 402. A, B, I'm looking for hands. Catherine?
This is just, I think it's just clerical, that everywhere, like for 402, it says his, it should be reading there. Just for the record, do you want me to go through where all the changes need to be?
Oh, there's, I did that
And
exercise
it's in
too.
this section, yeah. Okay.
There are an extraordinary amount of inconsistencies throughout this charter. It says he, it says there, it says he or her, he or she, and then in the back, there's a section that says anywhere where there's a gender reference as a he, it applies to all. I'd certainly like to correct that.
So just clerical,
Yeah,
that,
it is just clerical and just, we're quite inconsistent. So I think wherever there's a he or a he, she, we can put the word there throughout and we're covered. Is that right?
there or they.
They or there, right,
Mhm,
yes.
and that would cover them all.
Because, we're all over the place on this. I got tired of circling how many times
Okay.
I saw that. So that's clerical and we will attempt to fix that. Thank you, Catherine. C, D, E, F, G and H, I'm just looking around the room. All right, let's go to section 403, election of the county executive. Section 404. Section 405, there was a question from the county council list, which is qualifications of the county executive. The age requirement is currently 25 years old, and the question was simply, should this be changed? I see a hand in the air.
Yes.
Yes, what?
Yes, it should be changed.
Okay.
I thought about that, and I'm thinking that exec, as a 25-year-old person, 26, let's say, they're going to meet with the governor of the state of Maryland, the congressional delegation, other legislators throughout the state. And I'm thinking 25, you could be in the House of Representatives
Yeah.
at 25,
Correct.
but you're one of 434 other people, and you're on the back bench someplace. You could go into Congress at 30, at the Senate at 30. You're one of your 99 others. You're on the back bench someplace. You're going to earn to move along. And I'm thinking, you know, you go to a meeting. I'm thinking back in my own life. At 25, I probably could have found the bathrooms in the building. I'm not too sure I'd want to lead a meeting with people who are 50, successful business people, who would look at me and say, you know, he's a kid. He's a nice kid. So far, he's done okay. But I don't think he ought to be leading us down the business trail. So I would just make a comment. I think it ought to be 30 and 5 years of residence. That may not go anywhere, but, you know, I think, you know, the exec standing out there by himself, he's like the Lone Ranger. He's the guy. He or she is the person. And I think we ought to give it some thought.
Okay, we're giving it some thought. Does anybody have a thought? Would anybody like to make a motion about this age requirement?
Yeah, I will. I'd make a motion, we make the age 30.
Is there a second for that?
I'll second.
Thank you. Doug, is there any discussion on this?
Laura's got her hand up.
Laura, thank you. Thank you, Dallas.
If you look at your scorecard on 202A, you changed that requirement to make it a minimum age of 25 years, matching the language for the qualifications of the county executive. So I just want to point that out.
So you have to go back there also.
And then, in looking at the list of questions that the council sent to the committee, going back to section 402, I don't believe you guys discussed whether or not a specific restriction should be added, where the county executive could refuse department heads to speak at council meetings.
I didn't see where that,
This is second.
did I miss that?
That's what
I'm sorry. One thing at a time. Laura, what are you saying about the 25-year age back to section 202? Would you say that?
202A.
Yep.
You guys made a motion to add a residency requirement for the county council of 2 years in Wicomico County, and a residency within the district for 1 year, and a minimum age of 25 years, and matching the language for the qualifications for the county executive. So it seems like to me you were trying to match whatever that language is in the current section that we're discussing.
So basically, if I think I'm hearing you, we're saying it's okay to run for county council at 25, but we're attempting to say this motion is suggesting that the age requirement for county executive be 30, and we're contradicting what we've already done. Am I?
My recollection is that you were trying to be consistent.
Correct, that's what I'm saying. That's what, no, I appreciate that.
That's my comment.
So if we make this change here, we're going to have to need to make the change at 202, is what you're saying.
Well, I mean, I don't know if that's necessary. I mean, to Tony's point, it's if we, in a council setting, you've got 6 other people. If you got one 25-year-old, you got 6 other people to balance it out. But if you got the Lone Ranger, then you're going to want some more maturity.
Dallas, what you'd have to do is just go back to 202A and take out the matching language for the qualifications for the county executive.
Yeah,
That's all you'd really have to take out of there.
yeah.
You're right. I understand. Yeah, Dallas has made a good point, you know, several council people, and you're 25, that's insignificant. But if you're a 25-year-old exec dealing with several council people, it's a different ballgame, in my opinion.
Okay, so let's deal with the motion.
I'm sorry, I missed-
Let's deal with the current motion, and then we'll retroactively fix as needed. The motion on the floor, and there's a second, right?
Yeah.
Is to change the age, minimum age to run for county executive from 25 to 30.
I also thought we had a requirement for 5 years of residency.
We did,
Sorry,
that was,
It says that.
that's correct. That was established in 202, correct?
Is it
No,
run?
it's 2 years, it's 2 years in 202A.
Yeah, it should be,
Yeah, we changed it to 5.
I don't recollect.
I'm sitting here reading, it says add a residency requirement for the county council of 2 years in Wicomico and residency within the district of 1 year and a minimum of age of 25 years. That's what it says.
Yeah, and that's what we put in there for the council.
County council.
For council. Now we're talking about county executive.
I understand that.
Okay. Matt?
Okay, well, just a point of clarification, you say run. Okay, it would seem, might be fair if we're going up to 30, or in either case, when, based on the date they would take office. So you could be 29, and if we go to 30, you could be 29 as long as you turned 30 before you could be sworn in.
Yeah, it says at election.
Time of the election.
Time of okay, that's close enough.
Thank you, Matt.
Okay,
Good.
all right.
Any other discussions on this? All right, let's call for a vote on that motion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you. Do we need to go back to 202 and fix anything, or are we good? Laura and/or Michelle and/or Dallas? Are we good?
Good.
Okay. Now, Laura, you just also brought up about department heads. I'm not sure where that, I missed where that was brought up by the council.
So the question is, should there be a restriction added to section 402 that would prohibit the county executive from saying a department head could not attend a county council meeting? And that would be to attend to provide information to the council.
Well, and that's a,
I can tell you as a former department head, I would not want that one in there because you don't want to get stuck between, arguing between the executive saying don't go and the council saying do go. And both of these branches, you rely on to appoint you every 4 years. And oh, by the way, you're at will. And wow, you talk about having trouble getting people to apply now. You're really not going to get people to apply.
yeah. Thanks, Laura.
Well, that kind of goes back to not getting the information that the council requested.
Which goes back to good governance and establishing appropriate relationships. And I'm not sure I'm not sure putting any words in here is going to change people. It's a behavior problem, seems to me. Okay, we've gone through section 405. 406. I'm going to ask a technical question, Paul. Could this group, could we make I'm aware that the Compensation and Allowance Commission shall submit, I get that.
Right.
But the first line of this, county executive shall receive compensation of not less than $85,000. Could we change that?
You can make the recommendation if you want, but it's rests with the council.
I understand that, but I'm saying, could this charter review committee recommend as a change the compensation of the county executive?
To me, that's the job of the compensation committee to make the recommendation.
Not this committee.
That's a terrible salary.
And that's why we got back into that discussion tonight with the second job. That's exactly why.
Where are you going with that, Mike? I don't know.
Where I'm going with that is that the county executive of Wicomico County is grossly underpaid compared to the other county executives in the state of Maryland. That was pointed out by the Salary Review Commission. The commission recommended a significant salary increase, and that recommendation was summarily dismissed. So I'm suggesting that we, as the Charter Review Committee, could insert a different salary in the first line of section 406.
Of course we can.
That's all I'm suggesting.
Oh, okay.
It's your recommendation.
It's our recommendation. It doesn't mean, as with all other things that we're doing here, doesn't mean that the county council, remember, they can do whatever they want with any of our recommendations. So I'm just asking as a point of order or a point of, that is a standalone line in the charter, and we're looking at all other standalone lines in the charter, and could we go down this road? Or would that be something you might want to look into?
Well, no, you can make the recommendation. The council can decide if they wish to hear it or not, or do anything about it.
Because I read this as seeing that there are two things here. One talks about, of course, the compensation and the compensation committee. That's the second part of section 406. The first part is the line that says what the salary is. That's all.
Minimum salary.
Minimum salary.
Yeah.
Yes,
Looking,
thank you.
looking at, just looking here quickly, a county executive annual salary in Maryland, $75,310 is the average.
No, that's not true, Michelle. Respectfully, I was on that committee, and that's not even close to being true.
This is as of 2021.
And I understand that. I'm not saying that what you're reading is not what you're reading, but I'm saying that that's not accurate, respectfully.
Okay.
Sharon?
Yeah, I separate the first sentence from the Compensation and Allowance Commission, pretty much only because I was there when they came up with the 85,000, and it was the charge given to the Charter Committee to come up with a salary.
Okay.
And so I separate the two. Now that we have an executive,
Right.
then the charge of the Compensation and Allowance Commission is to determine the
Right.
salary.
So, I don't know, again, I'm just having conversation here. If the group wants to do anything, Phil?
I certainly think it's within purview of this charter review committee, commission, whatever we are, to review the salary if the salary is limited by charter.
Correct.
That's
We're
where-
recommending that
That's sort of
the
my-
charter
Yes.
changes to the county council. They can put it on the ballot if they want to or refuse to. But I think 85 is much too low to attract qualified people to the job. We were talking about that.
Yep.
So I think it's certainly within our rights, and I would move that we change that to $120,000.
Is that a motion?
Yes, it is.
there
I
a
would
second?
second that.
Catherine?
That's exactly the
Sir.
number I was thinking.
What was the recommendation?
That was the recommendation of the compensation committee.
But it would say not less than 120, because that's what this says.
Right.
Yes, shall
Right.
receive compensation of not less than.
Not less than
Yes, sir.
120.
Yes, sir.
I mean, they didn't have to pay the man $85,000. They could have
They
went to
couldn't pay any
120.
less.
That's
They
what
couldn't
Sharon
have. They
said.
had to pay
Yeah.
At least that.
minimum.
Yeah,
Yes,
but
they
they knew
did.
he was underpaid when they did it.
And they did.
Right. Any discussion on the motion that's on the floor? Further discussion? If not, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'd say table it.
You say, okay. I think that's how that works.
You moved to table the motion? Then
I
that
just
motion-
moved,
we
I
have to
moved a
vote on
table
that
making a
first.
decision on this. Are we also going to look at the county council side and what they receive? Is that in here somewhere that I didn't see?
It's not in here.
That's not in here.
This was in the creation of this form of government.
Right.
Okay, that's why it's
I
in
made
there.
this statement.
Right, Catherine?
This is not to make this difficult, but just for consideration. If we do put $120,000 as a minimum salary, should the minimum criteria to be executive director include some kind of college degree or something along those lines? Such as department heads have to have in certain areas, certain degrees. And that's written in the charter.
I would actually disagree with that. I know
Okay.
a lot of really smart people that don't have paper on the wall walls, and I know people that got paper on the walls that ain't worth the tablecloth. So, yeah, I let the voters decide what those qualifications
Yeah,
should be.
that, I agree.
Because there's a lot of people out there with businesses and smarts that ain't got paper.
So
It's elected position.
we're attempting to follow Robert's rules. Paul, so the way I just saw what happened, we had a motion, we were literally voting on the motion. There were a call for the vote, and one of the members of the committee, instead of voting yay or nay, voted to table it. So as I view Robert's Rules of
If
Order,
Michelle moves to table, she has to have a second. Then we vote on that.
what I'm saying,
If it fails, then-
point of order, we were literally finishing the vote. And so I'm suggesting that the motion, and by the way, this is neither here, anybody could have made this motion. I'm trying to be consistent with Robert's rules. We were voting, we took a vote. The vote occurred, and the vote of one of the members was to table, not an emotion, that was simply the vote, as a response to the vote. So,
You can't do it, you can't do it.
yeah, that's what I'm trying to
That's fine.
determine, Michelle.
That's the same as no.
Yeah, I mean, I think and Phil, I'm in total agreement that once somebody says table, and if it gets seconded, then it gets tabled immediately, but I don't think that's where we were. In fairness to the group and in the spirit of cooperation, I'm willing to entertain, and again, I'm trying to do this the right way here, as the chair, Michelle, if you would like to put a motion forward to table the discussion or the vote and specify, I think when you table, we bring it up at the next meeting. I'll entertain that and see if
What I
there's
want
a
to
second.
entertain, Mike,
Yes,
is
sir.
looking
Yes, ma'am.
at
Excuse me.
these salaries.
Yeah.
I mean, I know what you said you had when you did the compensation review. I just looked here and I see salaries that are very different. I just like to see currently what the range of salaries are before we decide if it's 120, 130, if it's 95.
I would think we could probably, Laura, I'm going to look at you. I would think that the work of the Salary Review Committee, which I think met about 3 years ago, it should be easily accessible.
I can email it to everyone.
Okay. So
That's-
Michelle,
That's basically,
and again, I'll yield to the group if we'd like to take a look at the comparative salaries, come back, revisit, help me out, whatever.
If we get new information,
Okay,
another meeting, then we can certainly have a motion and vote to reconsider
okay.
what we have
All right,
done.
okay.
I think we should go ahead and vote on this motion.
Well, that's what so we did vote on the motion, and it was,
Say
no,
yea or nay, did we?
yeah, we did. And it was unanimous with what we'll do,
My short-term memory.
it's all good. It's all good. We're working through this. Michelle, how about if we do that?
That's fine. That's
The motion carries. Laura, we will ask you to pull up the work of the compensation review, and I think, again, it wasn't overly complicated. We looked at the other counties, we saw what the salary was, and we'll bring that back at the next meeting. Is that okay with you, Michelle?
that would be perfectly
Okay,
fine,
great.
thank you.
Thanks for the,
We're at 7:45.
and Bob, who's so good at reminding me of time. It is 12 minutes of 8, and therefore, we are ready for public comments. We are, I think we just, hang on, we just finished 4:06. I want to truly, formally apologize that I let us go down a hole that had already been decided, and Blair, I thank you for that. It doesn't mean that we didn't have a great conversation and great discussion, but I will certainly do my best to avoid that the next time, and I own that as chair, and I apologize to everyone on the committee for that. And Blair, again, I thank you for pointing that out. With that, to the members of the public who are here, if anybody would like to make a comment, this is your opportunity to do so, and we just ask everybody to keep their comments to 3 minutes or less-ish, and we'll do the best we can. So with that. Mr. Taylor, good evening.
Good evening. I'll try to take these in maybe backward order.
That's fine.
Of points I think that are worth mentioning. As far as the salary that you've just been discussing, a couple of points. The statement was made that the county exec is grossly underpaid. I've looked at the executive salaries recently, and it's true that it is on the low side. However, when you look at the average of the other 8 counties with county executives, most of them are over 500,000 people, have a much higher per capita income, and when you take these things into effect, the underage is not that great. But to argue that somehow you need to have a full-time county executive and we would be the odd guy out by not doing that is not really the case, because most counties our size don't even have one. I'm talking nationwide now. And of course, that's true in a sense in Maryland, because there are only, if you include Baltimore, I think that there's 11 county executive jurisdictions. It's not the majority. The other, just real quick point, I did listen to Mr. Wilbur's suggestion on 315A, and the only thing that, and I'll have to listen to it again, but I think the initial appointment, I think Paul used the language initial appointment, the only initial appointment right now that for any of these people that are, or positions that are listed there, are the deputy directors. We decided last term, I forget whether it was last year or the year before, that those appointments would be essentially permanent appointments. They would not, those positions would not have to be reappointed on the 4-year cycle, the same as the director of administration, deputy, and department heads. And that was to, since they were kind of a little bit lower level, to give them assurance that their positions essentially were not subject to that 4-year renewal. And I think maybe that part of it needs to be tweaked a little bit. And I'll look at the rest of the language too. I may have some suggestions, but that one kind of jumped out to me when Paul was presenting that. Thank you.
Mr. Taylor, thank you for the comments that you make and the things that you send us. A suggestion, the last one that you sent was so long, and I think you covered a lot of different topics. If you wouldn't mind, because I know you're going to keep doing this, just if you'll just do one at a time, and I know that at least my brain turned off after I got through, so just kind of give us one topic at a time, I think would help us a little bit.
Try to keep it by topic, maybe not by point.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Anyone else? All right, I will, there's one thing, sorry. A gentleman by the name of Walter Olson is he's on the Governor's Redistricting Commission that is looking into gerrymandering, if you will. He will be in town on June the 3rd to kind of hear from citizens. I've asked him, he was also the chair of the Frederick County Charter Review Committee, so I've asked him to keep his stay a little bit longer. He's going to join us on June the 3rd at our next meeting. I've asked him to just present for a half hour, Q&A. Remember, we are loosely following what Frederick did, and if you have any thoughts or questions, how are we doing, what are we not doing right, I'm certainly going to ask them. Starting with, let's not go over 45 minutes on something we just decided at the last meeting. But anyway, Mr. Olson will be joining us on June the 3rd as a guest, and he's a wealth of knowledge. And Catherine, I even think about your thoughts on the districting and redistricting in Wicomico, and though that's not our charge, there are parts of the charter that talk about that. So just wanted to put that out there. So with that, if there are no other thoughts for the group? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Did we establish that?